Hi, I'm Mario Evon, and you're listening to Talk Truth, a weekly edutainment podcast discussing the things that most people are afraid to, but from a Jamaican perspective. From relationships, sex and sexuality, to the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, in this space we speak about almost anything with the intention to inspire, educate, entertain, and create a fair and balanced space where your truth shall become your power and set you free. Family, welcome to Talk Truth. This is your boy Mario Evon, and I'm so glad to be back here on another Sunday. Today, my guest has a bunch of things under her belt. She does reflexology, Reiki, manual lymph drainage, lymphedema management, holistic awareness, and she is an aware cancer coach. All in all, she describes herself as a transformation therapist, and I am so honored to interview this person who has been a friend of mine for a long time, and her name is Patrice Dwyer. We are going to speak about the mind, the body, and the spirit. And before we kick off, how could I not say Happy New Year, people? Happy New Year 2021. We're here. And one of the reasons why this episode is really a cool one, I thought to start the year off with, is because we need to be so aware of our minds, our bodies, and our spirits as we move into a brand new year. Sometimes we set so many resolutions for this year, but I think at the end of the day, we just need to be so in tune with ourselves. So check out this episode. It's a lot of interesting conversation, and as usual, leave a review and comment on it if you like it, and just tell us how it made you feel. Check it out. All right, guys, welcome to Talk Truth, and you are in season 3, and I am interviewing a very good friend of mine who goes by the name of Patrice Dwyer, and she does many things. And as usual, I like to ask my guests to introduce themselves. So, Patrice, welcome to Talk Truth.
Hi, Mario. Thanks for having me. I mean, it's kind of weird speaking to you in this forum.
I know, right?
It's
in a virtual format.
Yes, definitely. Not just in a virtual format, but to see you talking your truth in this kind of format here. So that's cool.
I know, right? And me interviewing you at that.
You know?
So let's introduce yourself to our listeners, and they tell us. I already said, tell us who you are and tell us what you do.
Well, I like to say to people that I am a woman of all trades. It's very difficult to say who I am, but lately I've been going by the title of Transformational Therapist because I think it mainly covers most of what it is that I do for work.
Right.
Who I am as a person, I would say I'm still a work in progress. Over the years, I've seen myself transform in so many different ways. And I think that kind of led me to the kind of work I do too. You know what I mean? Seeing the various things that life will throw at you and how you deal with them, and
That's kind of wonderful. That's one of the questions I want to ask you later on, but I don't want to go there as yet. But I've known you for a couple of years too, and I mean, we've all evolved quite a bit, but I know you've gone through quite a few transformations.
Definitely.
How I want to kick off this podcast, I want you to set the tone by defining to me what, in your words, is the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how are they different from each other?
Well, if we go with mind, because that's where you started, I see mind as that emotional side of you, that side that's connecting on the feeling and emotional level with the people around you.
Right.
Body, well, speaks for itself to a point. We're talking about the physical body and, what impacts the physical body. But with my work, when I look at bodies, I kind of see the mind as a body too, a part of the body, different levels of the body, and the spirit as well. And spirit,
but the mind is not physical though, right?
No, it's not physical, but it does impact the physical.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely has a great impact on what we day to day walk around with as our physical bodies.
Right.
In terms of spirit or soul, or, people have various ways of putting it. I see that as that spiritual body that connects to our creator, you
Right.
know, or some people will say God, or however, whichever name you
Whatever
choose,
you identify
however you
with.
identify, it's that
Hmm.
part of you that connects with the greater whole then.
Right. Would it be fair to say that the mind is similar to the brain in terms of making decisions, or those two things are kind of different?
You know, it's something I've thought about a lot. I think they're different.
Yeah.
There's definitely a connection there, but there's a difference. I mean, you know, our brain functions in a very practical way,
Scientific way.
scientific way, and our
Hmm.
mind doesn't always do that. So you'll have a
Right.
struggle where there's one part of you that's saying, and people say left brain, right brain, whatever, but
Right.
there's one part of you that's basically saying, you should you should drive that way because the traffic is less usually when you travel that route. And then when
Hmm.
you're on the way there, there's something that says, no, you need to turn back.
Right. And that's the
And
mind
and
speaking.
that's the mind speaking. And who do you listen to? You
Right.
know, there's
Right.
that. For me, I know I listen to that other part, that mind
So
that
you have
says, Patrice,
leaned to
turn back.
connecting to being led by mind more than even brain sometimes.
Definitely, because it has never led me astray.
Right. So when people say that they have a gut feeling, you feel like their gut is kind of like their mind.
Kind of what we call intuition, that little, yeah, gut feeling, for sure. I
Right.
feel it's part of that greater mind.
Well,
You
well, you
see,
can tell I'm. No, go ahead.
the thing is, you know, Mario, it's hard for me to actually separate mind, body, and spirit because they all interconnect so much. Because when you think about it,
Right.
okay,
And
go ahead, you go ahead.
I was going to say, no, I think that's what my medical mind was trying to do. And I think it was trying to separate them, but that pretty much leads us to why we're having this conversation. They're all kind of interconnected, eh?
They have to be. I mean, think about it when you're driving along the road and you get that thing, that gut thing. You know,
Yeah.
part of it is a connection to a greater space where there may be something going on and you're not in awareness, but that greater awareness is saying to you through your
Don't do it.
mind, stop and turn back.
Mm-hmm.
And your body experiences that by this but a butterflies, or you know what I mean, feeling in your gut then
Right.
that you know what, that push to turn back is, you know what, I need to turn back.
And then the beauty is that sometimes awareness will happen way later.
That's correct. I
And
mean,
then you realize that this is what you avoided.
that is correct. I mean, I have had so many experiences of that, that it's amazing. And this is why I have to honor what my mind is telling me at all times.
Right. I want to take you back to your earlier days in life when you were going to school, going to high school, going to university or college, and what you thought you wanted to do then.
Which one?
Exactly.
Oh
I
my.
kind of want to paint a picture of how your journey has transformed from an educational perspective. So, talk to us a little bit about the earlier days and what you thought you wanted to do, where you wanted to be.
Well, you know, when I was very little, I felt a connection to teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part because my mother was a teacher, an educator. And I
Right.
grew up with educators around me, aunts and so forth. But then there was also a part of me, it's funny because my mother kept a book for me, a early years book, if you will, that had like from kindergarten all the way up to the end of high school with
Mm-hmm.
pictures for every year, places for your, you know, report cards, that kind of thing. But at the back of each year, you would write like what you wanted to be.
Right.
And the other day I was going through that. And when I was very young, I wanted to be a nurse as well, apparently. And
But
then
that's funny that you did annual check-ins with what you wanted to be.
it was interesting, from that early age till now.
But interesting
Um,
that she had that insight to even allow you to want you to do that too. It's
to
an
do that,
interesting
that
thing.
is true.
Mhm.
That is true, you know. And then I saw it switch to lawyer. And then when I got to high school, I found myself leaning towards business,
Okay.
accountant, that kind of somewhere in there, management, business.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I ended up taking it. I went to university first in Florida, Barry University. Shout out to my Barry
Right.
alum.
Right.
Um, and for me, I decided to enroll, in international business.
Right.
I felt that's where I wanted to be, and I loved it. I was passionate about it, and it was great. And
I feel
then,
like Barry was a nice time in your life.
not all of it, to be honest. It was kind of a mixed time in my life. There was a lot that happened during that period. I mean, you'd need 10 podcasts to go through
I
all of
know,
that,
right? To cover that as a
to
whole
cover
other
that.
episode.
But yeah, there was a lot of awakening, I would say, that took place in me, even with regards to spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, my understanding of me as an individual first. No, not it wasn't my first time being away from home. I didn't mention that out of high school. I left high school here, I graduated, and I actually didn't do sixth form here like a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
I did 12th grade in Minnesota at a private Catholic school.
Right. I
Um,
didn't remember that. Mm-hmm.
the Hill Murray School in Minnesota, not Minneapolis, but yeah, Maplewood, Minnesota. But so it was very interesting for me just meeting different people. I think I was a bit of an introvert, at least I thought I was.
Right.
And I was never the type of person to go out to meet friends and make friends. People kind of just gravitated to me. They came up to me to talk and then kind of just hit it off, you know. And there were a lot of people who also thought that I was this, it's a standoffish person. They would say to me, they saw me and they would want to say something, but for some reason, it's like my face didn't look inviting. So I find that interesting. And then they'd come over and say, hey, I didn't know you were this kind of person. You know what I mean? But I was going through a lot of different changes. And I don't think that I didn't feel anyway that people understood what I was experiencing on a certain level. So it was an interesting time for me. And then near the end of my time at Barry, for some personal reasons, I had to come back home to Jamaica.
Okay, so you said that they thought you were a bit standoffish and stuff, but that means you still had some good friends despite the people who felt that way, right? Who were these people?
Well, funny, Mario, for most of my life, and even to some point, no. There are some people who look at me from afar, and my face is very expressive, which you probably know.
Yes.
So they'll see things or they just make assumptions. They look at me and they assume that, this is this kind of person. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And then they'll say to me, but, for some reason, they still felt like, they should come up and say something.
Right.
And then they come up and say something. And they're like, you're nothing like I thought you were. And I was like, yeah, what did you think I was? You know what I mean? Well,
And then they tell you, right?
yeah, and so that's an eye opener for me too, because it speaks to how much we tend to judge,
We judge, right, and assume.
and assume, yeah, which is
And
is
how
not
people
good.
generate perceptions too.
That's correct. That's
Mm-hmm.
correct. So, I've learned also with my work, I've had people come into me, and I will probably get more into that later down, but
Mm-hmm.
they sit in front of you, and if you're not careful, you'll be like, yeah, you judge them. And then when they open their mouths, it's like, okay,
You discover
you
something new.
discover something new, or you discover that kind of standoffish or whatever you thought was there was just fear, or,
I feel that way in
that type
medicine
of
every
thing.
day.
Yeah.
Kind of feel like patients are like a box of chocolate. I just never know what I'm going to get.
That's correct. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And
Because
that's
you
how
see
life
it,
is.
it's live. You see it on the outside and you wonder, well, I guess you use the things that you know to come to some kind of decision as to what it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And then it might just be something else.
That's
And it's
correct.
usually very interesting.
It's true, because sometimes people will come to me and it's after the third appointment or something that they kind of loosen up.
Right.
I start to pick up certain things that, probably a bit intuitive too, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Over the years, I realized that about myself too. So I
And the
was
more
able
you
to
deal
fix.
with people, yeah, you'll
Hmm.
be able to read them.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Well, I feel the first thing you said was that you thought you had a element in you that wanted to teach and then wanted to be a
Hmm.
nurse.
Hmm.
And it's funny that you're in the health profession now because I
That's
have this thing
correct.
where they say, go back to your childhood to try and find your passion.
Hmm. I want to tell you. Remember, the first thing I said was teaching.
Right, right, right. Teaching
I
and
have a, I
then
have a good friend who says that I'm a closet teacher.
not
Shout out to
anymore
my big
though.
friend. Well, no, but it's funny when she said it to me because, when I'm at work in particular, and I mean, just up to yesterday, somebody came in and we're having a conversation, about what I was about to be doing with them. And you
Hmm.
find yourself teaching, you're talking to them about the body and and I laugh, I look at myself and I just laugh and think, look at this, because I'm not happy if they leave and they don't have a
Understand.
clear understanding.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
So overall, I find myself teaching in various forms now as well.
Well, all right, carry me through. So
Hmm.
for specific reasons, you had to leave Barry. You left Barry. You
Yeah.
came back home. What
Yep.
kind of things were happening in your life before you got into this world
You mean in terms of the world of health?
of health? Well, I know I met you in an interesting situation when we worked together at the
Yes,
Ministry
we
of
did.
Local Government,
We
Youth and
sure
Community
did.
Development, and we were
Before
pretty
you
much
went to
doing
med school.
clerical work. Yeah, before I went to med school,
Yes.
we were planning events. We were calling people.
Hmm.
We
And
were
that's
putting
interesting
the
too.
names of dignitaries on
Uh,
envelopes and
on
getting cussed off
envelopes
for getting them
and
wrong.
yes. Yeah, that,
Oh
that
gosh.
that's that too, because it's funny how all these things, the skills you get from the various things you find yourself doing, um, and all the lessons you learn from all that, how that impacts now. Because when we were event planning and all these things, we didn't know that there are aspects of that would carry forward into, what
Not
we're
at
doing for
all.
future. That
I
was
never
summer
knew
work.
I'd. No, I didn't know I was going to become a musician and have to be paying my own musicians.
Aha, there you go. And
Very
there's
interesting.
certain things that everything comes full circle, eh?
Sure does.
Um, but certainly for me, I didn't mention this, but I've always been an avid reader.
Right.
And when I was about 16, I think it was, my mother and I had gone to Florida for summer, for the summer. And I went, as usual, first place bookstore. So I went into a Barnes and Noble, walking through, and a book just jumped out at me on
Mm-hmm.
the shelf. And the book was entitled Body Reflexology by
Interesting.
Mildred Carter. And I was like, what's that? I just picked it up, you know,
Mm.
started leafing through it and decided I was going to buy it. And that book, I didn't know what what impact that book was going to have on my life, but it helped me to make a lot of changes in my life. So from then, I read about various things. I used to try things on myself or even on mommy, what I mean? I was like, oh, this is cool. But I had no idea that in Jamaica, people were actually doing stuff like this at the time.
Right.
So,
And people were, right?
and people would have been at that time, yes,
Mm-hmm.
because, now that, I've been formally trained as a reflexologist, which we'll probably talk about too.
Mm-hmm.
I now know that 30 odd years ago, almost 40 years ago, people were doing reflexology in Jamaica.
Yeah. What do you think it was about the book that intrigued you?
I don't know. We
Like
go back.
I love biology. I don't know why. I just always liked to see the drawings of the body and stuff. So I always
Mhm.
liked anatomy and stuff. Like, what do you think in the book pulled you in?
Well, I even if it was in the book, Mario, is more like when I tell you, we spoke earlier about mind and connection,
Right.
and it just jumped out at me. I had no idea what it meant. Nothing. And at the time, I wasn't standing in Barnes and Noble reading the book,
Right. Which
you
you can
know,
do.
which you can do, but I didn't. It was like, I just knew
It
I want
just
this book.
called you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's when I got home and I started reading, I remember even reading it on the airplane coming back home. And I was like, wow, this stuff is interesting. I don't know. It just drew me in.
Well, while we're here, we'll hop all
Mhm.
around the place. Let's
Mhm.
tell our listeners, what is reflexology?
Ooh, well, reflexology is, well, it's referred to as a natural healing art and science too.
Hmm.
And the basic idea is that your feet, hands, and ears have points that reflect your entire body.
Yeah,
So your feet, they're like a little um, mirror image of your body.
yeah.
And it's interesting because people look at you like, yeah, really, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? But when you sit in front of them and you start to go through and work, and I'm able to tell, we tell people we don't diagnose or anything like that. We're not doctors, yeah? But
Hmm.
there's a lot that your body will tell you by just touching somebody's feet. And people
And
are blown away and amazed
by
by
it,
that.
eh? And I mean, as a medical doctor, I can tell you there's no anatomy that I learned that says that maybe the liver is connected directly to the foot. So I can see why people would be skeptical. What
Definitely.
direction does it go? Is it that the patient comes in and says, Patrice, my stomach has been hurting me for 5 days, and then you work on the stomach part of the foot? Or is it that you work on the foot and then they say, ow, and then you tell them, I think something's wrong with your stomach?
Well, what I find very interesting, Mario, and I know maybe, as a doctor, you may see it. People don't
Yeah.
always tell you everything when they come in.
Sometimes they don't even know.
Sometimes I don't know, number
Yeah.
one. Sometimes, too, I also find maybe it's a cultural thing here in Jamaica, but they kind of test you.
Right. To see how good you are. Eh?
Right. So they come in and they'll be like, because we do a general history of people. And
Mm-hmm.
so reflexology is considered part of complementary or holistic treatment. So,
Right.
and therapies. So we're not just looking at, oh, you have a stomach ache. You understand? You have to sit and do a little history to kind of figure out who this person is.
Yeah.
So it will often take me a long time, the first consultation with a lot of people, half hour, sometimes longer, just to figure out who are you, what makes you tick. So people will omit a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things from that. And as I start working, I pick up on things and I will ask questions. Have you been experiencing headaches at this specific part of your head and whatever? And they're like, "How you know that?" and whatever. I'm like, "Oh well, your feet told me." And they're blown away. So and
Interesting.
and for the people who I've worked on for long time clients of mine, if I see them more than once for the week, I can tell that something went off in the week. They had a stressful experience or something went off, or because I kind of know their bodies.
Right.
When something shifts, I can say something is off. I
So
remember
over time, you learn more about each
you learn
specific
more.
patient.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So
Or
you
client, if you may.
client or whoever. I mean, there are clients, when you're
Mm-hmm.
it's business.
Mm-hmm.
But you're able to tap in and figure out a whole lot.
Yeah.
With people. So it goes both ways. Sometimes it's just confirmation. They would have told you something, and when you get to the area, they're like, oh my gosh, what's that? And I'm like, well, that's what you were talking to me about.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I
So it can
mean?
go either direction.
It can go either direction, yes.
All right, we're hopping back now. So this book has
hmm
inspired you. You're experimenting
hmm
on your mother. You're experimenting on yourself.
And others,
W-
even while I was at Barry, people say,
Right.
oh, I have a headache. And give me your hand. Let me show you something. And oh, I have a friend from St. Lucia. He used to be amazed. And he'd find me at lunchtime or break between classes at Barry and here, Pat. And
Mhm.
he would give me his hands, to work on it.
Right.
So I found that I was doing it, instinctively doing it. And I think by nature, I've always been a caregiver.
Right.
So it just was natural for me to be doing things like that.
It's nice how you kind of, well, and this is debatable. I was going to say how you kind of stumbled upon it, but
Well,
it's
I
hard
don't
to
think,
say
yeah, I
again.
think it's a stumble. And I mean, as we go into it, I'll tell you it's no stumble.
There's no stumble. All right,
No.
all right. Keep leading me on. What's next on this journey in this space of holistic care?
Oh, well, so I found my way back to Jamaica. I
Mm-hmm.
completed studies at the University of the West Indies in management studies, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
So, still fulfilling that business side of me.
Right.
I started working at Jamaican Institute of Management. Most people don't even know I worked there.
I don't think I knew.
I did. I worked there as their program coordinator. I know Jamaica have a securities course that a lot of people in the financial sector do. That
Would
was
have
one
to
of the
do.
things that, we used to handle at gym and all of that. And while I was there, I started a master's program at UE
Mm-hmm.
and in communication studies, which was interesting. So
And
I
you're okay.
started that. Yeah, I started that program, and I just wasn't happy with the way the program was being conducted.
Right.
A lot of issues with it, and at the time, work was also becoming very stressful. And I think part of it was I just didn't feel like this is where I was supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Right. So you were
And
working and doing the masters part time.
I was working, doing the master's part time, and overall just not very happy with the environment for
Mm-hmm.
work. And I found myself getting a bit stressed, and asthma, which I had developed in high school,
Right.
kind of reared its ugly head again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, nah, this is ridiculous. So I was home one day watching television one Sunday afternoon, and there was this program that used to be on Exposure. Was it Exposure?
Exposure, I believe so.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Emily Crooks. Yeah, Exposure. And turned it up, saw her interviewing a lady on there, and she was talking about herbal therapy and reflexology. I was like, what? So, of course, now I tuned in.
And
And
this is years later, right? After the
yes,
book was
man,
in. Mm-hmm.
this is years later after
Mm-hmm.
Barry. After that, finding that book at 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so I listened to the program, and I wrote down her number, and I was like, I need to contact this lady and let me try this thing because for years I'm fooling around. Let me try it. So I made an appointment and I went to see her, and it was
Right.
an amazing experience for me. And we got to talking, and she said to me, you seem like somebody who would have an interest in something like this. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah. So she said, let me give you the name of my teacher.
Mm.
So I got the information, and to be honest, I put it in my handbag, and I didn't even think about it because
Mm-hmm.
I went right back into that routine at work. But then things got a little bit more stressful at work, and I decided I'd had enough, and I was going to quit
Yeah.
that job as it just wasn't feeling like what I wanted to be or do or whatever. And I made that decision. I quit.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was at home in transition because I was actually supposed to start another job, and was cleaning out my handbag, and the number fell on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is this? A paper. And I picked it up and I was like, oh, right, this is a number that she gave me. How long ago? Months before. And
Yeah.
I called and spoke with who later became my teacher, Monica Marsh. God bless her. She's way up in her 90s now.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I'm about to conduct my last class because I'm getting old and I'm going to stop doing this.
Wow.
So I was like, well, I want to be a part of that. She said, well, I need to interview you. I was like, cool. And that's how that started.
Mm-hmm.
And I
What
quit the
was she a
master's
teacher
program.
of, by the way?
Well, she was a registered nurse,
Mm-hmm.
and she trained to become a teacher of reflexology when she lived in Canada. So she was now teaching for the Canadian school
Mm-hmm.
here in Jamaica. Yes,
Interesting.
very. So yeah, I enrolled. I'm not propping up myself, but I was a star student.
But that's
I mean,
because you loved it.
I loved it, and I think she saw something in me. When she fully retired, she actually, gave me all her books,
Yeah.
and she said, you're going to go on and do this and teach, which I actually did because she trained me to become a teacher for Canada as well. So I taught for them as well for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was the beginning. I quit the master's program at UE.
Right.
I enrolled in a program for massage therapy right up at the physiotherapy school up at UE there.
Mm-hmm.
I did that. And after I did that, I was actually introduced to Reiki as well during the
Right.
period. And I did Reiki training. It was just it was a whirlwind of things that started happening at one time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just amazing. All these things started coming up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this course, that training, that, you know what I mean? And I
Right.
just started going into everything.
Mm.
So that that was going on pretty well. And then I got involved. I got involved in like the Reflexology Association of Jamaica. I was the youngest member at the time. And
Right.
went head on and took on positions on the board and all this kind of thing.
At this
And
point, how are you making most of your income,
oh, gee,
if
income.
any? Right. I mean, because you're no longer in the master's program. Are you still working
No,
anywhere?
I was not. So I realized pretty early on, oh gosh, no, I need to put this because by now everybody thought I was insane. Okay. My parents
Hmm.
thought I was insane.
I
Yeah,
remember this
what
time,
are you doing?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Um, what are you doing? What is this about? At my father's words, you do all of this for go rub foot. So I'll never forget that.
Right. Like,
And it was
how are you going to make money from it? How
how
will
are
you
you going to make
survive?
money? How are you going to survive? I mean, my mother
And
was
who
by my
wants this
deodorant.
anyway? Hmm.
This is it. And it all kind of made a shift around the time of was it Hurricane Ivan? It could have been then.
Hmm.
Or something, it wasn't hurricane. There was something that happened before. I can't remember what it was, but anyhow, the association, we were called to help um, go in, and we went around to various organizations and we were giving reflexology treatments.
Right.
So I remember a group of us went and gave to like the police, went to the commissioner's office. We set up there our chairs, everything. We were giving treatments all around. And at that point, we were we got a phone call if we could go down to, I think it was down in Kirkvine in Manchester, to one of the bauxite places there. They
Hmm.
wanted us to come and work on their staff. Staff was stressed and wanted us to come work on staff. And we went down there, and from just that work, people started calling me.
Right.
And I used to do, at the time, I didn't even have a car. So imagine me now taking a taxi, lugging around with my reflexology chair and stuff, and
Right.
arrive at people's homes. When I work on them and leave, what I was charging at the time, pretty much, I paid my
You
taxi
spin off
fare
in
and I
taxi. Hmm.
spent off most of the
Oh boy.
money. But it
Right.
started to feel good that I was actually earning something, and it kind of gave me the push to continue.
Hmm. But it was a
So
difficult time.
it was listen to me. Any entrepreneur can tell you it was a very difficult time, and over the years I've had to remake myself, transform over and over and over again, to go with the times. But I don't regret any of it at all.
Right. What would you say to people who, how you describe the book jumping out at you, the
Hmm.
number falling out of the bag? What would you
Hmm.
say to people who kind of feel like that's hogwash? Like, um, that is probably more in your mind than any universe. And I'm asking this as devil's advocate because I like to be.
No, no, no. I mean, listen. One of the things I've learned on my journey too is that we all are at different spaces, different places on our journey.
Right.
And so the experiences that I have had that have led me to understand that there's a greater picture that's unfolding that we're not aware of. And all of these little things, um, are part of that journey.
Right.
Destiny, if you will, or whatever, however you want to term it. So I won't knock anybody for feeling that way, because unless you've had certain experiences, it's oftentimes difficult for you to
For you to
process that,
appreciate it.
yeah, and to
Yeah.
appreciate it. But for me, I can definitely see how my life now, as I sit here and I look back at a lot of those things, I can see the puzzle pieces going together.
Right. And I have to agree because it took me a while to feel that way as well. But I guess maybe
Hmm.
maturity is part of it too.
Correct.
When you're able to look back on your life experiences and the things that happened and how they happened, you
Hmm.
realize that it's all connected
It definitely is, and
and
the
it's intense,
yeah, and the things you thought were horrible,
accidental or
yeah,
horrible. Hmm.
they actually played a big part in where you are now.
Yeah, I know a lot of other concepts are coming into this conversation, even though it's about transformation. But I know
Hmm.
we're touching a little bit on mindfulness
Yes.
and a little bit on being present. But let's talk a bit about How can somebody become more connected to their mind, body, and soul?
Mm.
What are the kind of activities that they can do?
Well, that is also very personal, you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things for sure is finding time to connect with yourself. So that could
Mm-hmm.
be, in a lot of Jamaicans, we talk about, we say we're a Christian based country, right?
Right.
And so we talk about prayer time and stuff. But when we look at, we examine what we're doing in that period for a lot of us, what are we doing in that prayer time? We may read a Bible verse or, you know what I mean? Is there
Right.
really a connection? Or we may go to church and sit there and listen to the minister preach or however you choose to do it.
And sometimes
Um,
prayer for some people is just asking for things.
just asking for things all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
My journey spiritually over the years is an interesting one too. And
Right.
people ask me now, I mean, I was brought up for the most part Catholic. I had a mother who she wasn't Catholic, but my father was, and she would always say she don't care where you go or what you do, you need to develop some kind of connection with God.
Right.
So she was never one of those people to hold you hard and fast to what her belief system was. So it kind of allowed me freedom to explore over the years. And so now when people ask me about my belief, I'll say to them, I don't know if I consider myself to be Christian, but I say that my religion is love.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in God. I definitely see the presence of that creator in my life.
Right.
Um, and my way of connecting is one, interestingly enough, through people.
Mm-hmm.
People I work with, people I encounter every day, even the people that annoy me. And
Yes. They teach you a lot of lessons
they teach you
actually.
a lot, and they teach you a lot about you. Sometimes they mirror you as well,
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they mirror you, yeah.
right? And finding time to connect with myself, which means for me meditation, even in exercise. I have a
Mm-hmm.
routine now of getting up early, 4 o'clock that time of morning to exercise
Right.
and meditate. I like going into nature. It's one of the most amazing experiences to just lie down on the grass and look up at the sky and ground myself, connect to the earth around me. I like hugging trees. I have a tree at Hope Gardens. It's my tree. My daughter will tell you that's mommy's tree. And I'll go and I'll hug the tree and connect. And if I feel like it, I'm feeling called to do it, I'll go to a church and sit down and listen.
Right.
You know what I mean? But there are various spiritual practices over the years that I have come to learn about, other religions and so forth. And there are just so many ways that we can connect if we choose to connect. But I find that a lot of us are disconnected, Mario, in so many different ways.
Right, because you have to even come to a place where you can appreciate what lying down and feeling the sunlight and the heat of the sun on your
Thank
face is
you.
like and enjoying it. I remember I started meditating maybe sometime this year. I had a little
Mm-hmm.
meditation practice, and one day, Patrice, I had been doing it first, and it was weird because I couldn't connect with the breathing, and just never made no sense. I was very
Mm-hmm.
distracted. I started to get into it more and started to feel different. So one
Mm-hmm.
day I went walking, and all of a sudden I was counting the birds, and it was
Aha.
very weird because it was kind of like I was walking, but the place kind of went really quiet. I could hear them
Mm-hmm.
chirping,
Mm-hmm.
but I never ever counted them. They were perching on the wires. It was
Mm-hmm.
just, it was a little bizarre to me because it felt like everything just stood still, even though
Uh-huh.
it was still moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, it blew my mind. And
Be-
it was coming out of this meditation, calm and breath that was kind of now
mhm.
residing in me. And I was like, wow, I never felt that before.
It's awareness, and it's something that I'm passionate about now, especially in relation to our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, with work, I've realized that a lot of people are very out of touch with their bodies. In truth, I mean, you and I know in high school or any other school, unless you think you're going into the field of medicine or something, you're not really learning that much about the human body,
Right. Or unless you're like an athlete where you're
or you're an
always using your
athlete
body,
or
right?
what have you. And so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us are out of touch with our bodies. I feel Like, we need to do so much more in terms of educating people about your body, aside from telling you about puberty and things like that.
Right.
We need to go into more about it and have people have a clear understanding of, in simple terms, how your body works.
Which probably explains why I'm not so much of a hypochondriac, because I think I understand how it works. So I know when to respond to it
Exactly.
and when not to.
And then the thing is that that is also something that's inbuilt,
Right.
And I tell people who come into me, listen, you may go to a doctor and they could scan you from now till next year and all of these things. But if none of us can tell what you are feeling inside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you are very in tune with your bodies, and I know some people who are really in tune, that if the slightest thing goes out of whack,
They know.
they know, and they'll go to the doctor and they'll be like, oh, nothing is wrong. And they're like, they insist, listen, I know something is out of whack. And they're correct,
Mm-hmm.
because it's your body. So a lot of us are out of touch. And you see, even now during this COVID pandemic period, we don't
Right.
realize that we've been given such an opportunity to do a lot of introspection and soul
Absolutely.
searching. And so a lot of people complain about quarantine and all this stuff. Let me tell you, I've had some of my greatest breakthroughs during,
Can I tell
especially the
you?
initial quarantine period in March
Yeah, the
that we
first
had.
one was big
Oh
for me
my
too.
gosh. Um, every single day, there was some new insight that came to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I thought to myself, part of the challenge that a lot of people are having right now is that we don't want to spend time with ourselves. Half of the busy stuff that we do is
Is
to
to get
avoid
away
ourselves.
from
Of
ourselves, eh?
course. So imagine having to sit with yourself for 2 weeks or
For 2 weeks,
whatever.
much less months.
Worse, with other people in the household who are doing the same thing. Not a good look.
I'm pulling you right back to awareness of body, because I want to use it for awareness of mind and awareness of spirit. So some
Okay.
other ways to be aware of body, I'm guessing, is everything from maybe even knowing you have a fever to your body weight to feeling heavy to like, what kind of things are you talking about when we're talking about just being aware of the body?
Aware of your body. Well, first of all, aware of what the things you feel actually say to you.
Right.
I have this thing about learning your body language. Okay,
Yeah.
and we're not talking about body language that would, in the general sense, but when you're sad or when you're fearful or when you're stressed, what are the cues that your body gives you to tell you this? For some of us, we
Right.
may have a
Right.
headache. For
Right.
some of us, we may feel hot in our faces or anxious, butterflies, whatever. But every day your body is talking to you. It's
Right.
telling you things. But do you understand what it's telling you?
And do you respond to it when
And do
it
you
speaks?
respond? Because the thing is, you can't respond if you don't understand what it's telling you.
Exactly.
So this is where we are now when we get to this point where, do you speak your body language?
Well,
Most
but
of us,
love languages with yourself.
that is it.
Yeah.
So people will come to me, hate to drift, but a quick story. I had a lady who came to me. She had breast cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I tend to ask, is what's happening in your life? What happened in your life leading up to this diagnosis, that type of thing? And, she gave me a story about her husband who had been away for years and all this kind of thing. He went to the United States. He didn't come back. Even when she got diagnosed, he didn't come back. Initially, it was because he was trying to get his paperwork together. But then after he did, she was the one who would have to go and visit him. He never came home. So I asked her how she felt about that. No way. I said,
He
no
was
way.
what? He's her husband, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
I said,
Mm.
what you mean, no way? It didn't bother you in the least that your husband didn't even come home when you were facing one of the greatest challenges in your life? She said, I don't think so. But in
Mm.
talking to her, I realized she was so out of touch with feelings in general. So I said to her, I want you to do something for me when you go home. It's going to seem strange, but just do it nonetheless. She said, okay, what? I said, go home, go in the bathroom, get a pillow, put it over your mouth and scream. And she's like, what? I said, yeah, I want you to scream. Why you want me to do that? I said, because I don't think that you even understand about feelings.
Right.
She says, well, I've never, growing up as a child, my parents taught us to just, you just do what you need to do. You know
Right,
what
be
I mean?
tough and move, right.
Yeah. So I told her, she went home and, she called me that night and she said, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I said, what happened? She said she started screaming. She did it. She felt weird, she said, but she did it. And then she found herself feeling something and she realized that what she was feeling was anger.
Right.
I said, really? She said, and I said, who is that directed to? She said, I think I'm angry at my husband. I said, you are? I said, you really? No, honestly, it was a big revelation for her.
Right,
And she
right.
said
And
she
I mean,
screamed. Yeah, she screamed till she cried, and she's like, I'm angry, Patrice. I said, I know you are.
yeah. But she had to discover that herself. You just had to
She had
guide
to,
her.
I couldn't tell her that she was angry. But her whole body was in this state of, her shoulders were up. She was, you understand what I mean?
Right.
So many of us walk around. The majority of people who come to see me, they walk in and their shoulders are up to their ears and they don't even know. I say, put your shoulders down. What you mean?
Right.
And I go and stand in front of them and I go like this. Oh, yeah. That's why you're walking up and down every day. You're not even in awareness of that.
Right. Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to list some of the stuff that you do currently. So
Okay.
you now have done a lot of training and you
Mm-hmm.
do reflexology, Reiki,
Mm-hmm.
manual lymph drainage,
Mm-hmm.
lymphedema management,
Mm-hmm.
holistic awareness, which is kind of what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a cancer coach, an aware cancer coach. Did you come up with aware or that's
I
some
did.
other thing?
I came put aware. I'm a
What
cancer
does
coach.
aware stand for?
Mm. Aware is so many different things, Mario. Believe me.
Well, I see it's an acronym, so I
It's
know it has a sentence.
it does have a sentence.
Let
Aware is
me
all about access.
access your way
Mm-hmm.
forward and
Mm-hmm.
provide access to resources that will
Mm-hmm.
educate and empower you on your cancer journey.
So it's assessing your way forward.
Uh-huh.
So we need to assess you. So we need to know where you are. After we know where you are, we help to figure a way forward
Right.
and we provide access for you to resources that will educate you and empower you on your journey.
Do you find that you generally work with terminally ill patients who are going to die, or you get people who have a diagnosis and recover?
It's across the board. Part of
Mm-hmm.
what got me into cancer care in the first place was lymphedema management. And I mean, most people may not be in awareness of what lymphedema is. I'll quickly
Mm-hmm.
say,
Yeah, man, tell
in
us.
Jamaica we say elephantitis, which
Elephantitis.
is
Mm-hmm.
which is not the correct
Right,
term.
that's a whole different thing. Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different thing. But the reality is, lymphedema is a result of an insufficiency in your lymphatic system. It's not
Mm-hmm.
flowing the way it should flow. And even our lymphatic system is something that most people are not even in awareness of that we have one,
Right.
and the important role it plays in our immune defense and all these things. And so most of the people that I see with lymphedema, which presents as swelling, whether swelling, it can be swelling anywhere in the body as a matter of fact, but it's most commonly seen in the arms and legs.
And where cancer is concerned, it's usually after breast cancer surgery
Not
that
necessarily just,
that these patients develop it.
with where cancer is concerned, most of the people I see develop lymphedema post treatment for cancer.
Right.
So if it's breast cancer, oftentimes the lymph nodes are removed,
Mm-hmm.
or people get radiotherapy to the chest wall area or where have you. And once you remove the lymph nodes, you create an insufficiency in the system.
Mm-hmm.
So even if somebody doesn't present with swelling right away, we say that they're kind of in a latency stage because the insufficiency is there. And we have to put preventive measures in place, or it may appear at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I've seen people 20 years down the road who just develop swelling.
Right.
So it can happen that with arms, and not just the arms for that, but also the chest wall can have swelling various places. For people who've had like prostate cancer and they sometimes get lymph nodes removed at the groin area or they have radiation there, they get
Can
swelling
happen
in
in
other
the
places, swelling in
right
the legs, swelling in the penis and scrotum.
scrotum. Yeah.
Yeah, swollen. I've seen basketball sized scrotums.
Oh wow. So
Yes.
basically, since this system isn't draining or managing this
Mm-hmm.
lymph, your job as a lymphedema manager is to help to push it
To
along and move it
to
along.
move it. So what we do is it's quite cool actually.
Mm-hmm.
We can open up other pathways where you have a healthier flow and
Mm-hmm.
redirect the flow from the area that's having the challenge to there.
Right.
So that's basically what we do. We redirect flow using manual lymph drainage. And then we also use, other techniques. We use bandaging at times,
Mm-hmm.
compression bandaging
Mm-hmm.
to help reduce the swelling and so forth in the intensive phase of treatment. And then we'll use like compression garments to maintain um, the new limb size, if you will, the reduced limb size.
Right.
But
Okay. And it may not ever come back to normal, right?
it may not, it's not a cure. We don't have a cure at this point, but it's management. And believe me, for a lot of people who walk around with those challenges, to have
Yeah.
their limb reduced to a point where it's manageable and they can move around, and it's a whole new world for them. So, basically that's how I got into cancer care, because I started to see a lot of people with
Lymphedema.
lymphedema, right, post cancer treatment. And then I started to realize that there was so much more to this world of cancer.
Right.
Because in questioning people about their lives and whatever, I discovered that the emotional, the mind, all of those things definitely had an impact on how their bodies responded to treatment. It also had an
Right.
impact on what developed in their bodies, I would say, as well. And some of them would tell me that as well, that they could tell you for sure that I was going through this period of stress and whatever, and I feel like this is what contributed to this.
Well, you're leading me right where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, all right. So after seeing a lot of the patients, then
Mm-hmm.
this kind of ties the whole mind, body, spirit thing together,
Yes.
and why you became very passionate about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell me
Because
about any. No, go ahead because
no, go ahead. You go ahead
I
because
was going to say to tell me about a case. I wanted you to kind of tell me
oh,
about some of the patients and what they're like and how do they process. I guess I'm guessing someone who thinks that they may die. So
mm-hmm.
there's so many layers to that,
There
and then
are
dealing with the treatment and the diet and the disease and everything else that comes with it.
there's so much, and as you mentioned that, as you did ask me initially, which is how I got into this conversation about if I work with a lot of people who die or they recover. And
Right,
yes, over the years I've worked with a lot of people who died, and but in my mind died with healing. And I know that's weird for a lot
right.
of people to understand. And it also got me passionate about palliative care, which is another thing that we probably may have time to touch on.
Mm-hmm.
But so, for example, I met a lady. She called me on the phone, and right away, before I even had a chance to fully answer her, she said, "Listen, I have breast cancer. I've had it for 5 years. I'm not going to any doctor for no chemo, this and that, and my arms are swollen. I hear you deal with lymph drainage." And this is how she was on the phone.
Right,
So I was like,
right.
okay. And then she said, "So can you help me?" So I said to her, "Well, okay, I'll come and see you, and we'll have a conversation about what's happening with your hands, and then I'll see where it goes from there with your
Mm-hmm.
arm." When I went to see her, I realized that there was so much more to this. So we had a conversation about why are you not accessing care?
Right.
And I realized that she had a lot of fears. She had a lot of fears about the system because she had been kind of mistreated, if you will, in the healthcare system before. And so she
Mm-hmm.
decided she didn't trust the system anymore. And she wanted to try something, a different approach. And she also said that God would heal her.
Yeah.
So we had a long talk. I went there, which was supposed to be a half hour, turned into 3 hours. And we had a long talk about a lot of different things that were taking place in her life. So she had younger children who were acting as part of her care team at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't an ideal situation. But I said to her, "I don't know how much I can help," because truthfully, when I saw her, I realized that things were not good. She could
Yeah.
barely take a proper breath. So I thought, well, let me go and see how we can get this woman to, move past this point where she's at. So I went there saying I'm working on your hand, but ultimately it was about, let's have a conversation and see how we're going to move past here. And so it took a lot of talking too, but I eventually got her to a place where she agreed to access care. I connected her with a doctor. I physically drove her there too because she told me she didn't have transport, but she was just finding another way not to go.
Right.
And so sometimes I find myself doing that. It's not conventional, no, but I do these things because I
Right.
do develop a connection with the people I work with, a deep connection, and I think it helps. It helps them to, get to various parts of their journey too.
You ever
So,
worry about getting too close to them, or you feel like that's part of your responsibility in the
I think initially I was more concerned about that. Initially, I got probably too connected. I used to cry a lot. When I tell you, I come home every day and cry.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But I got to a place where I realized my role in all of it. And so it doesn't impact me. It impacts me, but it doesn't cripple me, if you see what I
Right,
mean.
right, right, right.
And so I was able to get her access to care. And in fact, with the doctor I took her to, she was like, boy, just in time. She had a blood count was like 2, but anyhow,
Wow.
yeah. So she, even though based on her diagnosis, it was not looking good, she lived longer than they thought she would live. And during that period, when she became fully aware of what was taking place with her, and she turned and she said to me, I have to thank you, Patrice, because I think I would have been dead already if you didn't come into my life. Because you were tough with me. One day she was upset with me because she says, why are you being so hard on me? Because I had to just give it to her, So you
Yeah.
have to, but she said, this is what you've been trying to tell me. I said, yeah, but it wasn't my place to tell you. I had to take it to somebody who could tell it to you the way you needed to hear it. And she was able to do things in the latter part of her life to make decisions she was putting off, to do certain things, and to come to a place where she felt healing. I was with her up to 2 days before she made her transition. And I think she just called me to say bye without even saying that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I could see that how her being able to make that shift positively impacted her children and everybody around her
Yeah, because
during
her
that
whole
last
energy
period
would
of
have
her
changed
life
as an individual, just
because
towards the
everything
situation and in
shifted.
general in the last period, right?
That's that's correct. So I mean, that is a case of somebody who made her transition. But there are others I've worked with who have come from a place of not even being able to say the word cancer because it's just everything that they know cancer to be is just scary. And I said to people, what's the greatest fear you have? Dying? Well, newsflash. We're all
Right.
gonna
Everybody
die.
dies.
And I don't know why we don't seem to remember that part.
I know, right?
We're all going to die. So my thing is all about, let's put the scary things in place, like what your wishes are and that type of thing. Let's put that in place. And then let's focus on living now. Let's focus on what your goals are for treatment, in terms of whether it's mainly quality of life or, what your goals are. And let's live each moment fully.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. Because once you handle that aspect of things, it will take care of itself. Your family, they know what you want and whatever. Now you can fully focus on your healing journey and emphasis on journey, right?
Right.
Because
Because transformation is never
it's,
finite, right? Never
no,
ends,
it's
right?
not. It's a
We
journey.
and then even when we finish here, we still probably transform. I'm assuming we continue to
Well,
transform.
that's how I feel about it. We all have our different views on that. But that's how I see it. And I tell people it's like you're driving along the highway and then all of a sudden you hit fog and you have to slow down. Or there's a pothole, either you see it up ahead or you didn't, and you could prepare for it, or you didn't see it and you drop into it.
Right.
It could be
Or you can
deep,
swerve.
yeah, or you
Could
can
be deep, it
swerve.
could be shallow,
It
right?
could be deep, it could be shallow. It may have you pausing in there for a moment because it's so deep. But so this is how the journey is, and that's how the journey is on with cancer for a lot of people. There are smooth roads and there bumpy roads or roads with obstacles. But it's journey, it's life. You could have cancer and go out there and get hit by a truck and it
Exactly.
won't kill you. You understand? And it's true to every other condition that we could possibly have going on in our bodies.
How would you say that this line of work has changed your perspective on death? I was going to say your relationship with death, but
Ooh,
I prefer perspective.
you said perspective, but relationship is actually correct as well. I want to tell you, as a child, I had a great fear of death.
Yeah.
It was so bad to the point where if I heard the RGR death music, I
Right,
would
the
start
music.
bawling. No, I swear
Right.
to you, I would cry. And my father would be like, what is wrong with you? You know, that kind of thing. But as a very youngster, I was 6 years old. The first person, I had a friend who died. She was 7. And it was weird for me because I didn't quite understand what it was all about, this whole death thing. And so over the years, I had a great fear of it. Then when I was about 16, I had another friend who, well, I think I was 14. He was 16, who tragically died. And that made me feel like something inside of me just broke as well. And then when I was in Florida for school, someone very close to me died at 21 years old in an accident. And that tore me up for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, why am I being encountered with all this death business? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was really a big thing for me. So when I started doing this kind of work now, I was like, oh no, here I am again.
Working with people who might die. Some
Working
of
with
them,
people
right.
who, But then there just was a shift at some point in all of this. And in working with a lot of these people, I realized just how at peace most of them actually were with the fact that this is what was happening with them. But what was interesting is that they wouldn't share that with the people around them, especially family, because family don't want to know that you're so at
Family
peace with
has different
leaving.
concerns in that
Oh my
time, right?
goodness,
Yeah, that's a
and
whole other thing too.
that's a whole other another thing. So when I started volunteering up at the Hope Institute initially, and then I was introduced to the Palliative Care Association of Jamaica, and started to understand more about palliative care and what it meant to work with people and ensure that they have quality of life for their entire life. Because one of the things is, I don't like the term dying anymore, and I change it now. For
What do
me,
you use?
I say living in transition.
Living in transition, yes.
Yeah. Because you're not dead until you literally took that breath
And
and
it's
you're
funny that
gone.
living in transition is an acronym for lit. But anyway, that's funny.
Well, yes. Because
And
you're still
but
living,
this
and
is lit now.
it's lit. It's important, Mario, for people to understand that people are still living until they're not. And we miss that
Exactly,
point. We miss
exactly.
that point. So it's like even there's like a hush hush when people come around, Lord, boy, them dying and they treat you like that when they
Like
come
you're
and
already
see.
dead,
Yeah,
right?
it's like
Right. Then,
when I
but yeah,
walk
they're
into
still
the,
here,
you're
yeah.
still here. When I walk into the room, I had a client who transitioned about 2 months ago in this COVID period here, and he was such a joy to be with.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 2 weeks before he died, I started going to see him. He wanted to see me, and I went to see him. And, I'd laugh. We get in the room, and I said to, woo, he was quite jaundiced at the time. And I was like, oh my God, look at my golden boy. You know what I mean? We had,
Right, right.
and
You were even in a space where you could make a little fun about the
we were
situation.
always laughing, and people would be amazed we were talking about death.
Yeah.
But he was fully there. Family probably didn't understand how much there he was. For the past year I worked on him, he was fully there, right? But and he said one of the things he liked was that he could freely talk to me about it and it wasn't weird.
Right, right. Because they made it weird for him, but it was
It
okay
made it
for
weird
you.
for him to say that. Yeah, it wasn't weird.
So you were his safe space in cancer,
That's correct. His safe space in dying. And
in
and I
dying.
and I want to tell you, it's something I'm working on now, a little program that I'm calling Live Well. Live Now, sorry. Because it's like, let's handle the things, those details about death, about transition, about our healthcare, who we're
Right.
going to choose to speak for us if something happens to us, that type of thing. And then we just live,
Yeah.
you know. I lost my mother last year. Can't say I lost her, but her physical presence is no longer with us.
Right.
And she went through her transition period. And she told me things that she wanted for herself, and it
Things
was
that she never did, or things that she wanted in
things that she
transitioning.
wanted in transition
Right.
for herself, things that she wanted with regards to her health care for herself. And she said she felt I would execute her wishes.
Right.
Okay. And it wasn't easy because I was wearing both hats. The hat came off the day she took her last breath. The hat
Right.
of, okay, I understand this whole thing about palliative care. I understand about people's wishes. I understand all of that. But then
But
it
your
was a
daughter
struggle.
as well,
Yeah, it's a
and
struggle because
caregiver.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at my mother. I'm seeing signs that's telling me that, oh, yeah, she's in that zone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a struggle. What do I do now? I know what to do for work, but this is my mother.
Right.
And can I truly honor, what she wants me to do in this time? When she decides she's not eating anymore, what do I do with that as a daughter watching my mother not eat? You know what I mean?
How did you navigate that? Because as you say, work would prepare you in one
Well,
way to deal
I,
with this, but this is different.
I had to remind myself of what I promised her that I would do.
Right.
Even against, and I don't think initially my brother understood some of it either because, it's a struggle. But
Yeah.
then he realized that this was truly what she wanted. And we have to understand that it's not about us, but it's about them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we make it about us because that's just by nature who we are. We
By
don't want
nature,
to
who we
lose.
are. Right.
Yeah,
We don't
you don't
want to
want to
lose.
lose
We
your
don't
loved
want to lose the
one.
joy we get from the loved one. Right.
No, we don't. And so when they make a decision, we see them as being selfish sometimes too, without even thinking it. How could you
Right.
think of not trying anymore?
Right. Right.
Why you want to leave me? You really want to leave me behind? You know
Why
what I
don't you
mean?
want to stay here
Why
forever?
don't you want to stay? Yeah. And she actually said that to me. She says, I can't stay till the end of the world. I don't
Yeah.
want to. You know what I mean? So
But even this conversation is highlighting the fact that we have to really wrap our heads around the fact that there is an end.
there is an end.
There's
And
an end, and the best we can do is make the end nice, as nice as we can
well,
in this
if
phase.
there's anything as a good death, I'd say my mother had that.
Right.
And it's not a topic that people generally talk about. But when I tell you it was an amazing experience, and if you've never sat with somebody who had a peaceful transition and you don't understand what it's like. And you don't realize that deep connection when you
Right.
just said my mother left. She didn't die, she left. It was just
Yeah.
amazing and it's hard to express it. So, and she's not the only person I've sat with through that experience. And when you
Right.
talk to family and you let them, because sometimes family panic in the end and they're like, should we put them in the hospital or should we? And you have a conversation, but this is what they wanted. And just as how I'd like to say to people, when somebody is pregnant about to give birth, we make a lot of preparation. We have room made, we have crib, we have clothes, we have
Right.
baby shower.
Pediatrician, everything.
Yeah, everything is lined up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that we forget is that the baby may never get here
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
Okay. But we have all that prepared for this baby, and the baby comes, and everybody's at the hospital waiting to greet and all of this. So when we're leaving this plane that we came to live on, when we're leaving, don't you think it would be good for us to have that too?
Yeah.
The same way we were welcomed in. It's awesome, and it's such a blessing and a gift when we have an opportunity to be with our loved ones as they make their transition. Because when we lose them suddenly, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. I
But
don't. I was gonna say I don't
yeah,
feel bad that we ended up here because I feel like all of it still kind of come
it's
connects to
still
mind, body, and
connected to
soul,
mind, body, and soul. I know for
and
people it's
transformation.
more, but yeah,
Actually,
it is
more than
transformation.
anything, transformation.
There's a lot of transformation that can take place in that last period of people's lives, not just for them, but for family.
I'm trying to find a nice final question for you, but
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you if you feel like there's some people who don't transform, or you feel like transformation is inevitable. We have to transform Life doesn't allow us to not transform. I'm not talking life to death. I'm talking us
In
evolve as
general,
humans. You think there's some people who are static?
I don't know if static. I don't think we're ever static, Mario. I think
Yeah.
um, we may be stuck in various
Phases or stages.
phases and stages, and ultimately, some of us choose to just remain there, going around in
Yeah.
circles. But even in that, there are periods where there's transformation taking place. Even in that,
So I
and
guess it might be more fair to say some people might go through larger transformations based on how willing they are to seek it, and others may not.
I would say, yeah, I would
Yeah.
say that. I definitely say that. I mean, transformation is inevitable.
Right. It's inevitable. Eh?
In some
Patrice, I
way.
can talk about so many things in this realm.
Oh
This
my
could be
gosh.
5 podcasts. All right. So what I want you to do for me,
Hmm.
what are your final words on mind, body, soul, and transformation? I'm going to mix it all four. What
Nice.
kind of things you'd want anyone listening to this who is not even connected to this world as yet?
Mm.
What kind of stuff would you want to say to that person? Because somebody might be listening to this who has never processed any of this at all. Mind,
Mm.
body, soul, mindfulness, transformation, a peaceful death.
Mm-hmm.
All of this might just be very foreign to them. What you would say to them?
I'd say be aware.
Yeah.
Be aware. And what awareness means is there's so much into that, but to be aware of where you are right now in the space you're in, to live fully in each moment that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned counting birds.
Yeah.
And one of the most amazing things for me right now is I wake up early in the morning, but sometimes in my sleep, just before I open my eyes, I can hear birds and I know it's morning.
Right.
And before, I don't know if I was that fully aware that the birds were out there so early, welcoming the new day
Right. And telling you what time it
and
was
telling you
almost
what time it was, right?
without you seeing a watch. Mm-hmm.
Without you seeing a watch. So
Yeah.
I'd say trust your inner self.
Yeah.
We live in a time now with a lot of uncertainty. People not really trusting what they're being told oftentimes about what's happening around us and everything. But
Yeah.
there was a period when human beings were so in touch that they knew when a hurricane was coming without a weather report or rain
Mm-hmm.
was coming. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? The animals are aware.
Mm-hmm.
You see the ears perk up on the dogs when something is happening and they go seek shelter before an earthquake comes. And
And they
so
use everything to make those
they
decisions. They
use
use the
everything to
wind,
make,
the sounds,
they use everything
the
because
temperature. Yeah.
they are aware of where they are right here, right now. And I think mindfulness goes back to that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we all need to practice. If we're going to be eating our dinner, let us taste the food that's coming into our mouths.
Right. Right.
Right? Let us drink and sip our juice and actually taste it and feel it going down our throat and just to be fully aware of the moment that you're in and live. Because that's when you're going to really realize you're alive, when you can
Yeah.
experience and fully feel everything around you.
Well, Patrice, I'm glad we got to have this conversation. And just to tie it all up,
Hmm.
over all the years that I've known you, you've always been naturally and innately kind of connected to life in this way, which is funny that back then when I met you, you weren't doing half of this stuff, if any of it.
Hmm.
But now that you're here, it all makes perfect sense, and that just reminds us to trust the process
Hmm.
and to follow our minds and our bodies and our souls, and
It's
to
true. It's
allow
true.
them to flow and lead us to where we need to go.
That
Because I
is
think
so
we're
true.
exactly where we're supposed to be, right? And I think you're definitely aligned with what you should be doing, and it's beautiful to watch. So congrats on that.
Well, thank you. And so are you. And I've been watching you over the years too.
Boy,
I've
yeah, no,
seen your
I'm a whole
journey.
lot of podcasts too, and I'm just trying to flow and evolve
Hmm.
as everything tells me to. So I just try to listen, like you say,
Just
and
listen
see where it
and
leads me.
don't be too hard on yourself. For all of us, it's a lesson about not being too hard on ourselves. We all make what we call mistakes, but they may not be
And
on another level.
don't be too afraid to be led into something new.
Don't be
It
afraid.
might be beautiful.
That's correct. I actually made a post about that this morning,
Yeah.
not being afraid to not letting fear stop you from going out there and doing what your spirit, your soul, everything is guiding you to.
It's guiding you to.
Yeah.
Patrice, tell our listeners where they can find you. I mean, some of your services are specific to certain things, but there are other things that anybody can come and experience, like reflexology or Reiki. Or how can people find you on social media? And if they want to have a consultation, book you, talk to you.
Well, on social media, you can find me at Patrice Transforms JA on Instagram. I also have another company, Navigating Health Services, that's on Instagram too, and on Facebook. My website is patricetransformsja.com, and it kind of gives a little listing of a lot of what I do.
Right.
But you can always just click on the link tree on my Instagram bio, and it will give you way more into the 1,000,001 things that make me click.
Right.
Yeah.
You're like a holistic multi-potentialite.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where that is concerned, but woman,
you say transformation therapist, right? Let's hold
That's
on
what I put, because it really is. That's what it is.
That's really what it is. Yeah, that's
it's
really
just
what
a
it
lot.
is.
Yeah.
Patrice, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing all the insight on this. It's a wide and a vast world. So I know if we haven't gotten deep enough for some people, they're gonna have to go do some research and reading. But I know, and you know, that it's very deep and very wide. So it's hard to even touch the tip of it.
True. Very true. Very true.
But thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. It was good.
And thank you for having me. It was
Absolutely
interesting being on this side of the fence with you. So that's cool.
Good. Same must go sometime. All right, Patrice. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
You just listened to episode number 46 of Talk Truth, and I interviewed my friend Patrice Dwyer, Transformation Therapist. Go and support her page at Patrice Transforms JA on Instagram. Her website is patricetransformsja.com, and go to her link tree, which is also /Patrice Transforms JA. She also has another page called Navigating Health Services, as you heard, and you can go check that out as well. As usual, as always, Happy New Year once again, and thank you for listening to Talk Truth. And you know what to do, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us at our new handle, TLKTRTH, that's Talk Truth without the vowels, and the website remains talktruthja.com for now, but everything else has changed to TLKTRTH. And guess what, people? Look out for some merch in if you think we're going to change it to the brand new logo. It looks so nice and modern. And when I have merch, it's coming. So if anybody wants a Talk Truth sweater, t-shirt, beanie, cap, mug, just look out for it. It's coming. All right. Again, this is Talk Truth, a place where your truth shall be your power and set you free. Until next time, bye.